Press it. Oh. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. This is the the second installment. I'm getting very excited about our third installment, too. Our second installment of the Georgetown Center for Business and Political Studies to focus on little tech and telecom nuggets. So we thought we would bring you the best ideas from the most informed speakers who are doing research on topics that are dominating the news in I would say, the tech, telecom, broadband, and policy space. So for today's session, we are extremely excited to welcome Dr. Dominique Harrison from the Joint Center for Business and Political Economic Studies, who has recently published a seminal report that delves into the very specific question, how can we close the digital divide in the Black rural South? Dr. Harrison's work caught our attention because of its specificity and because of the timeliness of the recommendations that have been identified in the report. So Jen, before we get into the discussion, I would first like to welcome Dr. Harrison and ask you if you could offer just a few high points from your illustrious background.
Yes, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. So I work at the Joint Center as the Director of Technology Policy. We are a program that examines emerging technology issues and suggests policy solutions on behalf of Black communities. We have three program pillars. The first is platform accountability, which focuses on issues as it relates to misinformation, disinformation, and reforming Section 230 to have civil rights protections. Our second issue area that we focus on is broadband access and adoption. So ensuring that Black communities have access to affordable, high-speed internet. And our last issue area is privacy and algorithmic fairness. So that is the personal information that is used by technologies that results in discrimination. So we could conduct original research and produce data on these issues as it relates to Black communities. And I'm happy to talk more about some of our broadband work today.
Thank you very much. Let's, for anybody who is joining us who is not aware of the report, which I would highly recommend because more than anything else, aside from being incredibly topical, it is digestible. There are pictures, there are graphs, and it's not that long, which for a DC audience is incredibly important these days because we're all being overwhelmed. So before we get into the details, I would like to ask you, what prompted you in particular in the center to specifically hone in on the situation facing the rural Black South as you talk about in your paper?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just also say that what you'll find online is our shorter issue brief, but we have a longer 46-page report on the issue that is coming out in the next few weeks. We're working with our PR company to help in the dissemination of it. But we wanted to make an impact on the infrastructure discussion. And so we hurried and put out that brief. But in general, I want to take a little step back and talk about history as it relates to that region, because that's what encouraged us to look specifically in those communities. So Booker T. Washington explained the term the Black Belt was first to describe a region with rich and dark soil that enslaved people were taken to because it was most profitable for agriculture. And so the term was used to describe the large numbers of African Americans in the area. And over the years, researchers have defined the Black Belt using various formulations, including Southern counties with populations that are at least 40% Black. So the focus of our report overlaps, but differs from the term the Black Belt because we exclude metropolitan counties in the region. And to better understand the rural Black Belt, we looked at rural counties with populations that are 35% Black or higher. And so with funding from google.org in 2010, we developed and published a report on the future of work in the Black rural South, which you can find online. And in regards to our broadband work in the last year, we wanted to take a deeper look at this region as it relates to lack of access to broadband. We understand that lack of access to broadband is both an issue in the metropolitan and rural areas, but efforts to close the digital divide often overlook the Black rural South. And in the Black rural South, what we found is that over 36% of residents who identify as African Americans lack home access broadband. And this is a result of lack of availability and affordability of broadband services.
Dr. Harrison, if you mentioned the population of these markets, I'm curious, do you have any economic indicators as to what part of, how you kind of further hone into these parts of the country?
Yeah, so I also want to say that the Black Rural South, as we define it in our definition, includes areas that have been designated as rural by the USDA. Right. And that includes 152 counties in 10 states in the South. So that's Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. So as it relates to economic disparities, there are a number of indicators that show us that it is compounded by racial disparities in the region. 49% of Black children live in poverty in the Black Rural South compared to 18% of white children. And Black unemployment rates in the Black Rural South are more than double the national white unemployment rate. Our analysis of county level data, projects that there will be a 9% net job loss for the Black Rural South. That has happened between 2017 and will continue until 2030. And by comparison, distressed rural areas nationwide could on average experience a 3% net job loss. So there are a number of results of these kind of adverse effects of slavery, sharecropping, Jim Crow, and other strategies to maintain a low-cost labor pool that have really shown the kind of the racial and economic disparities that persist in the Black Rural South today.
So let me ask you this. We can talk more about what the problems are, and they are deep and they are serious. But I also wanted to focus just for a quick minute on what you see or what you found to be the potential for the way in which getting broadband, high-speed broadband, into people's homes or into people's hands, if their preference is for mobile, whatever it is that they're preferring. How do you see that impacting things like their educational opportunities, the actual economic opportunities, whether it's directly or indirectly related to the broadband technology that we hope to bring there?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I want to emphasize is that many communities, African Americans and Latinos, use the internet via their mobile phone. But we all know that mobile phone is not a great way to access job applications, to do homework, to receive certain kind of services that are offered by the government. It's just not the best way to do work and play. And so it's important to have access to the broad internet in home, which is what we call broadband. But it's also important that there are speeds which allow you to use certain services like download or stream videos and access such services as we're on like Zoom to be able to do the work you want to do. So that's what we're focusing on, right? And we know that broadband access alone will not completely solve all of challenges that the Black Rural South is facing, as well as other kinds of regions. But we know that broadband is a critical component in starting to realize the opportunities to increase earnings, job growth, educational attainment, and health care. Greater broadband access and adoption in the region could help earnings and reduce unemployment. Research shows that expanding access to broadband provides larger employment gains in rural areas. It also shows that moving from no availability to full availability boosts employment in rural areas by 2.2 percentage points. Mm-hmm. Schools in the Black Rural South, we know, face a host of challenges, including teacher retention, achievement gaps, funding components, and a lack of broadband that limit educational opportunities. And expanding home access to the internet could address some of these issues. I will also say that healthcare is a major component of issues that the region has faced. And many counties in the Black Rural South, as we have found, are largely underserved in terms of healthcare. Mm-hmm. There's lack of physical access to hospitals or clinics, and many existing rural locations are closing. So for example, from 2010 to 2018, Many states that have Black rural South counties experience some of the highest numbers of rural county hospital closures. And that's important, especially as we think of being in a pandemic today and needing access to telehealth services, which could be solved for if people had access to the internet at home. And again, using mobile won't be enough in terms of accessing that services because of the lack of quality of those kinds of services.
So here's a question. We are, as I said it at the top, we're only in our second version of our little lunch nuggets. So subject to feedback and input from everyone, but we're also able to switch it up. So I just received a question in the Q&A, and I would encourage anyone who's viewing to, if you want to engage with us real time, to please go ahead and put a question in the Q&A. And I think it's a fair question given what we were just talking about, Dr. Harrison, and that is, this question comes from James Johnson, and he's asking, why is it that local governments, particularly in majority Black counties, are reluctant to apply for government grants and loans for building broadband infrastructure? So I guess the question is, number one, would you agree with the assumption in that question? And number two, what are your thoughts about what the answer is?
Well, I wouldn't say that I necessarily agree with the assumption because I don't know what the information out there is actually saying. I haven't talked to Black leaders in those areas. But what I will say is that many government offices don't even have a leader to focus on these specific issues. I want to just bring up, for instance, the state of North Carolina, that it has done a lot of work as it relates to broadband and ensuring that there is digital equity across the state, right? But they have a focused leader. They have a department that focuses on those specific issues. They are able to invest. They have the capacity, that means people. They have the knowledge and expertise to understand what the challenges are and where the monies are that are located across a number of programs within the department, across the federal government, And so if you don't have capacity, if you don't have the expertise, if you don't have the time and are able to dedicate, your efforts towards applying for loans, then that is an issue, right? And you're not able to get the monies and subsidies that are out there. So I wouldn't say that though they are reluctant. I would say that there is probably issues as it relates to expertise, capacity, time, and really being able to have focused staff that are intentional about solving these issues for those communities.
Absolutely. In an odd way, it almost boils down to the axiom, you have to spend money to earn money or to make money, right? They need all of those things, capacity and expertise and the actual time, when in fact they don't have any of those.
Right.
So let me ask you this. One of the things I was surprised, I would say surprised, but it caught me because this is something that a lot of people have been putting out there in their various reports on suggestions to close the digital divide in all different markets and in parts of the country, is this idea of education. Not education just on how do you use this? What's an app? How do you download it? What are free? That sort of thing. But bringing an understanding at a very, very grassroots level as to why this ultimately is a helpful tool to these communities in whichever way they would find most useful. Perhaps in some areas that you've identified, it's talking about how it's relevant to agriculture. In other cases, as you said, it's about arming the teachers in the school districts with the knowledge, the relationships, and the technology itself to actually make it productive for the kids. So I was wondering, where do you see that kind of education? And by that kind, I don't know that I'm actually giving a definition, but there seems to be an educational component to connect the people who don't have this capability with the wherewithal to make it happen and explain why it's relevant to them.
Yeah, so, I think that is, to me, I interpret it as it's a complex issue. And I say that because I had earlier conversations with someone at NTIA who does surveys on broadband access and adoption. And as the data they show that some people of color say that it's not relevant for their lives. But my argument there is to be critical of how the question is asked.
Right.
If you ask a person, you don't have internet. No. Why don't you have internet? Is it because you can't afford it? Someone might not be forthcoming with saying, no, I can't afford it. They may just say, I don't want it. And I think that has to do with a number of cultural issues, and there might be some disagreements with other people's interpretation, but I think that's why the NTIA has actually gone out with requests to revise the survey and the ways in which we ask the question to really get at the specific issues as it relates to why people may not find it relevant. But the point is, I think that many people understand the relevance of it, given the extent to which people use their mobile phone to access the internet and use different services. And we know that the data shows that, issues of affordability is a major problem in access to the internet, right? Cost of internet is very expensive. And so I feel like the issue here is not about teaching people why it's relevant, but helping people to understand that there are a number of resources that are out there to be able to access these kinds of subsidies, right? Or opportunities to be able to get the internet. But again, I think that the question that we ask when it gets to relevancy as it relates to the NTIA surveys could be asked in a different way to really elicit the kind of response that we need to address this kind of issue around if it can help their lives in the ways that it can better their lives.
Dr. Harrison, I'm curious, if you had, a blank canvas and unlimited money in the world, how would you allocate it? Would it be to improve coverage where there is none? Would it be to improve access where there is some? Because, the broadband definition really isn't that fast. Would it be to increase subsidies? Would it be, in my world, there's so much private money investment interest in rolling out fiber. Would it be tagging along to some of that? I'm just curious as to your thoughts there.
Yeah, so I would say building out access where there is none. Studies show that internet service providers are less likely to build digital infrastructure and deploy broadband in low-income or sparsely populated rural areas because companies don't see these spaces or communities as being they're being a return on investment, really. So they're seen as high-risk endeavors. And so we need more infrastructure in those spaces, and we need this also equates to kind of speed of the services, right, as you alluded to. We know that Digitally Denied, a report done by Derek Turner at the Free Press, has shown that most Black communities have one service provider, right? I think people should have options. And as it relates to subsidies, people should be given the choice to pay any provider that they want, broadband provider, for internet services. And I think there should also be a separate voucher that allows people to purchase a computer or a tablet to be able to access the services at home on a device that they can really find most useful in doing the kind of work and play that they need.
Right, that definitely is the higher part.
Can I also pick up on another? So I just wanted to highlight for folks who have not had the chance to get through the summary report, which is you do specifically recommend that there needs to be a meaningful broadband benefit program. I heard you specifically just say here as well that it should be up to the consumer to make the choice over which provider they want and what sort of service plan. Which is something that I know has been recommended by multiple groups and is certainly part of the conversation on Capitol Hill. In that regard, one of the other recommendations is about prioritizing federal dollars potentially to invest in broadband programs being developed or run by historically Black colleges and universities, otherwise known as HBCUs. Can you give us a little more specificity about what you're thinking there? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I really thought it was important to talk about HBCUs in this report. We talk about it in a number of ways. HBCUs play a significant role in their respective communities, and they are often anchor institutions that boost surrounding economic activity. And several of the nation's 107 HBCUs are located within the Black rural South. The great thing about HBCUs is that they're able to advocate for policies that can strengthen community resources when implementing kind of programs and services. We've seen over the pandemic them be able to, able to help communities, surrounding communities, sign up to get vaccinations, right? Provide information to the local communities as it relates to telehealth services. Some communities like Howard University has telehealth services. They also have an adjacent hospital located in Washington, D.C. And so the point is they provide a lot of kind of information and capacity that other kind of anchor institutions may not have. Also, HBCUs can act as brain trusts that convene and help community leaders apply for broadband grants and help foster technical assistance in applying for broadband opportunities at the federal, state, and local level. And so what I'm hoping is what we've seen in the money that's being allocated by the NTIA is that local nonprofits that are owned by Black entrepreneurs or leaders can partner with HBCUs in developing programs or services for the community. And I hope to see some of that. I also hope to see that state and local leaders who, when receiving this money, also partner with these universities to understand some of the kind of economic, social things that are going on in their adjacent community. So in which that they can be able to provide the expertise and knowledge and how to best address some of these issues. So they are also what we've shown in our report is they've been shown to have programs around increasing or looking into kind of agriculture activity or kinds of services for and looking into like local farmers and those kind of challenges and opportunities that exist as it relates to those communities. And so the point is that they have for a long time been supportive of Black populations. And I think there are a lot of ways in which they can help in providing some of these services and building some of these programs that leaders hope to do as it relates to closing the digital divide.
Do you, what has been the reaction in any of the audiences where you've discussed this, which I think is a really practical, pragmatic, really good idea? Are people thinking, yeah, I don't think that'll work, or is it a warm reception? And how do the HBCUs think about it? Do they want to play this role in their communities? I assume yes, but curious what you've learned.
Yeah, I definitely see a positive reaction. I mean, based upon NTIA's work with HBCUs in the past, they've done a lot of research on the importance, again, of HBCUs. I've been on panels sponsored by the Federal Communications Commission with presidents of HBCUs who see this as a very important issue. I mean, their community consists primarily of students, right? And some of them being adults who live in the surrounding communities. And so they see it as a priority, but also an opportunity in ensuring that we provide all the resources and tools necessary to connect, people and individuals. I'll also say that many organizations see the importance of anchor institutions in helping provide broadband services and programs and closing the digital divide. But I really think that there should be more, highlighting more of the kind of best practices and best kinds of models of HBCUs partnering with local governments to provide these kinds of services. If I'm not mistaken, the Department of Education may be doing something soon that really focuses on HBCUs as it relates to expanding broadband.
Dr. Harrison, we have a question. Carolyn, also, if you have the link, people are asking for the link in the live chat, if you don't mind putting that in. But one other question we got from the audience is in your experience, what's the biggest challenge, access or adoption? I was curious on your answer there.
Yeah, I mean, for our research, what we found, it's the issue of affordability and the infrastructure, right? So the cost of broadband services is expensive. It is mostly low-income Black Americans in the Black rural South who say that they can't afford services. Pew Research substantiates this as much as other research that is being done in that regard. So that's one of the issues. And the other issue is there is no infrastructure in the area. The data that we do see in terms of FCC, what is available, that there is no access to the services. And then the data that we see from Microsoft shows that the services that are available is at a very low speed. And so those are the two biggest kind of issues, is both the affordability and the availability of services.
And I wonder, with Telecom kind of waking up to the need for more fiber, you have AT&T with a very strong commitment to fiber. Do you see that changing? The hard part for me is I live north of the city of Chicago, and I really only have Comcast. AT&T speeds here aren't competitive enough that, I think that will change. But do you see that as a challenge that the AT&Ts of the world are focused on improving their coverage in markets like Chicago versus rural areas?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that there is a missed opportunity. If we really want to close the digital divide, we have to ensure that we're investing in all communities. This kind of also relates to issues around digital redlining, which mimics the same kind of things that we saw in redlining and housing in communities, right? Is that these ISPs are focusing their attention on larger, more wealthier communities as opposed to low income, sparsely populated communities. And so I think that there are a number of ways to provide this access, whether it is the fiber, right, whether it is satellite. But I think that we should really make the commitment and be intentional about choosing any option that will help in addressing this issue and making sure that we're not giving, people who don't have as much money lesser services or lesser quality because we don't want to make the commitment to solve the problem.
No question.
So can I ask you a quick question on the redlining? Digital redlining a number of years ago was used quite often to describe behavior by platforms where through their algorithm and their searches were incorporating biases that under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, for example, you could never get away with, right? Trying to sell payday loans to young African men in college, for example. So here's a question, which is, as we talk about ways in which we break down existing barriers to folks building access and building in areas that are sparsely populated, whether that's, urban deserts or rural, truly agricultural areas, how do we talk about it in a way that we're having all of the players around the table, as opposed to, I think the terms redline and digital, when you pair them together, for some people are kind of the third rail and they immediately go back to their talking points. Question how we have a productive conversation about that and diffuse some of the rhetoric.
Yeah, well, the first thing we know is that it's occurring. We've seen this research come from NDIA, National Digital Internet Alliance, and they have shown that this is occurring in New York. They've shown that it's occurring in California, and that is because they were able to do research that showed that despite the fact that an ISP was supposed to serve all communities, they ended up not serving the low-income communities or areas. There needs to be more research as it relates to the rural areas, but we know that it is happening. So one of the things I'm excited about is that there's actually language written in the infrastructure bill that tells the FCC that they should start rulemaking on digital redlining and ensure that it doesn't occur. I'm also excited that it instructs the FCC to provide information on best practices and policies to ensure that it doesn't happen. And I'm hoping that we can, as civil servants and other kinds of nonprofits, can provide guidance as it relates to that area. As this influx of money comes in and new agreements are developed as it relates to providing services by ISPs for communities, I'm hoping that there are policies that ensure that ISPs are not ignoring all communities and are in fact providing the best kind of quality of services for broadband. And so I'm hoping that people address this issue, right? Again, it is happening. And so let's develop the best kinds of agreements and policies to ensure that all communities are served and that we're not leaving anyone behind.
Absolutely. Really quick question. What was the name of the report you mentioned for the research in New York and California? I hadn't heard of that one before.
So it's done by NDIA. I can look it up really quickly, but it really focuses on AT&T and Verizon and the lack of build out in specific lower income communities.
And I did put the link to Dr. Harrison's report, hopefully in the chat. I hope I got it right. But I guess maybe just a final question, maybe the inevitable kind of long pole in the tent to get this going. is it, what is the hardest part of kind of, in your view, of closing this digital divide? I realize no easy answer, but
Yeah. As a researcher, I just feel like research and data is important, and you need to understand what the challenges are in your community to understand where the opportunities exist. And so the biggest obstacle is not having targeted solutions to connect specific communities, right? And so it's important to start there. We know that poverty is connected to broadband, and we need to focus on those communities that have high poverty rates, right? Have a number of low income community members. So there needs to be investments in digital skills training, investments to provide devices for people to be online at home. And we need to ensure that there's infrastructure and access to high speed, quality, affordable broadband. And I think that the investments so far in terms of the amount of money that's going to be allocated for these kinds of things is appropriate. It'd be great to have more. And I'm hoping that the bill passes and we're able to do that and to help close this digital divide and solve these kinds of problems.
All right, last question, and then we will wrap up. And I thank you so much for spending at least, you'll have some time left over for an actual lunch today. In terms of efforts to bring in what some would argue are more political points, as opposed to what you were just talking about, which are targeted solutions for particular problems in specific areas. When you are facing, having to make a choice about which of these different paths to getting the money out there beyond what is already allocated, how are you feeling when there are efforts to really take money away from, for example, programs that are focused on affordability and instead are being used to support a particular business model of a particular, on the ground, maybe it's a muni, maybe it's an electric co-op, but not necessarily people who have experience in broadband, but who stand a very good chance of getting some money or maybe some preference in the process as we go through reconciliation. How does that add up to where you guys seem to be coming from, which is a very pragmatic, let's roll up our sleeves and start solving actual problems right now in very real ways? Do you see the two as maybe being mutually exclusive?
I don't necessarily see them as being mutually exclusive. I mean, at the end of the day, I just feel like communities and people should have all the options necessary. I don't think that states should be restricted from municipal broadband and cooperatives being able to provide broadband services for communities. And so I think that, again, it gets back to whatever the challenges that specific community faces, the best ways to approach that issue. It may be doing a cooperative. Not all communities have a cooperative or municipal broadband networks. And so any option that will get to the challenges and provide the best kind of opportunities, I think, is the way to solve the problem. So yeah, I think that's how I would respond to that.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we are slightly a minute or two over our 12:30 designated we are done time, but I wanted to thank Dr. Harrison for joining us for yet another really interesting conversation. I feel like I learned something every time I speak with you. I also wanted to thank everybody for dialing in. I think we are looking at next month's nugget will be in the mid-October, maybe October 20th, but don't hold me to that. I also wanted to say, at least my takeaway, Jen, I don't know if you'd agree, but to me, this discussion's nugget was maybe there's three of them. Number one, we need to have practical solutions that are focused on actual problems in particular areas. We need to be sensitive that the communities in the Black rural South reflect some endemic racially motivated problems that maybe other areas that are rural in the country don't face and therefore are deserving of very specific and particular policies. And then last but not least, we need to do some education. Again, not, as Dr. Harrison said, to explain why this is all important, but how it can be integrated into their everyday lives for all the folks living in these communities. Jen, did you have maybe another?
I would echo all of those statements. And again, Dr. Harrison, thank you so much. I have a few pages of notes, so thank you for teaching me quite a bit.
We are going to post-production, post a link to the audio as a podcast, as well as a link to the video, if I'm not mistaken. So anybody who was not able to stay online or listen to us for the full discussion will be able to do so after the fact. And Dominique, last word over to you.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, Jen and Caroline. I really had a great time. I also want to tell the audience that in the next 2 weeks, we will be producing the 45-page longer report. So please sign up on our website, jointcenter.org, for more information. And I'm excited to continue this work, and reach out if there are any questions or if you want to partner on any projects going forward.
Will do. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Thank
enjoy
you.
the rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.